not cancel elections.
Wow, well, that's been
So-
But you all want
But we'll
unification.
know about that by tomorrow, probably.
Definitely.
Oh, we'll know before the meeting.
The rumours are strongly that the LGA is going, the NSLG is going to announce tomorrow.
Oh.
Rumours.
I know.
Oh, that'll be fun before the meeting.
Does that add a little bit extra to it for no reason whatsoever?
Great.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we're having
Mike.
problems with the iPad in the chamber, that it doesn't pick up the Wi-Fi, and when it does, it then drops out. So the IT cancelled that.
It was 140 grand to refit the chamber. We had a look at it.
Oh, something not funny for me.
I think that's probably an argument.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Audit and Risk Committee. I'm Councillor Michael Higgins, Vice Chair of the committee, but I'm standing in for Councillor Julian Spence, who's unfortunately unwell, and we send him our best wishes. I think if we start off with some introductions, starting from my left and work right.
Good evening. My name is Marta Doroszkiewicz. I am from Democratic Services.
I'm Kimberly Sohn, regulatory and review advisor, Democratic Services and clerk in the meeting.
Gillian Parson-Jones, Legal Services.
And portfolios leading the council, observing, but also co-portfolio holder for risk.
Jenny Sturgis, Policy and Performance Officer.
Richard Bates, Strategic Director of Finance and Resources.
Candice Keat, Financial Services Manager.
Councillor Murray.
Oh, Sam Tony. I was listening very carefully. Yeah, Councillor George Murray, I'm a final resident councillor for Farm.
David Beeman, final resident councillor for Farm North West.
Trevor Davidson, councillor for Hindhead, Hazelmere.
And online, I think we've got a representative from Grant Thornton.
Or both of them are. Ade?
Yes, good evening all. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Ade Oyerinde. I'm director with Grant Thornton, your external auditors.
And I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your first.
All right.
I do apologise.
No problem. Good evening, all. I'm Tafazo Nimbawari. I'm the audit manager for the 23-24 audit.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm always appreciative of officers attending so late to these meetings to accommodate us councillors. So thank you very much for that. We'll start with item 1, apologies for absence, if there are any.
Yes, we have apologies, as you said, from Councillor Spence and also from Councillor Barker-Lomax.
Thank you. And the minutes from the last meeting were held on the 25th of November. They're published on the council's website. Does anyone have any amendments they'd like to make? I have one under statement of accounts 22-23. We could just note that they were duly signed and published for the accounts. That's the only amendment. There's nothing else. I think we can approve those. There's one thing from the last minutes where that Zurich were going to do hold a meeting for us in terms of risk. That didn't go ahead. It wasn't cancelled. We didn't receive any notice of any cancellation. Kimberly, do you know any more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do make apologies for that. What it was booked by Guildford staff, by Democratic Services at Guildford, and I booked the invite for Waverley members. Unfortunately, on the Thursday when we had the briefing, I was on annual leave, and when Democratic Services received the email, they made a presumption that Guildford, because they'd booked the appointment, had cancelled it, not realising that Guildford had invited their members and sent the invite to me, who had then invited you. And that's why the cancellation didn't go out. So I do apologise. It's my fault for being on annual leave.
I've had a chat with Democratic Services to make sure that won't happen again.
Yes,
Not
yes.
your annual leave, that is. But
Thank you for that.
But the one in Guildford.
I have discussed it with my team and explained
Indeed, it wasn't
what
your
needs
fault.
to happen.
Funny enough, sorry,
Yeah, of course.
the day before I was in a joint training councillors briefing with with the portfolio holder, the joint training regime.
Yeah.
And they didn't mention it. We were all talking about how to encourage members to get to meetings and everything else. There was that was the idea of this meeting, this joint membership meeting for training. But no one mentioned that thing. And when I came on Thursday, it was like, oh, all right, well, it's not going to help any, is it? So
just for information, that it has provisionally been booked for the 6th of March from 7 till 8:30, and a confirmation email invite will be sent out to everybody. But I'll make sure that everybody knows what they have to do if it does get postponed or cancelled.
All right. Thank you very much, Kimberly. I mean, I think it's important that we do have that take place, especially as we've seen the report from Guildford. Risk is all our responsibility, really. So
yeah, I mean, the best excuse I can give is everybody apart from me are obviously brand new in democratic services and didn't know the process. And I know that's not a valid excuse, but that's my excuse.
Sorry, Kimmy.
We're
all cool.
That's what matters. Exactly. Item 3, disclosure of interest. Are there any?
I've received none prior to the meeting.
Any? No, all good. Are there any questions from members of the public?
We've had no questions from members of the public or from members.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6, annual governance statement. Now, we do actually have the previous year's annual governance statement. Bear with me, look. Yeah, so it's at pages 117 to 130, if you want to have a little look at that. So this is not for us to go into detail what we want in the next annual governance statement 24-25, but what you think should be included. So there's 2 items there, the English devolution white paper and the MPPF. Welcome the committee's thoughts on what you think should be included, whether you think that's enough.
Well, my feeling is it's until we actually hear anything more, it's very difficult to comment.
On the MPPF, because we will know tomorrow more about it after the briefing, won't we?
The MPPF, I mean, the proposal is obviously it's almost double the number of houses to 1,481. That obviously has an impact across the council. So I think
It's also going to be the sensitive for response, which we haven't seen yet, but no doubt we will, and that will have its own implications. That's why I struggle a little bit to be able to feel that we can, at this moment, us to be able to comment on either of those 2 issues.
No,
There are issues coming up, but
also because actually there's going to be more guidance on the infrastructure and whether people can delay things by, we don't know that. There is, isn't there?
Councillor Fallows, did you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would strongly urge the inclusion of the white paper on local government reorganisation, regardless of the decision on the elections that will take place almost certainly this week. The timetable is fairly punishing, and the template from MHCLG as to a bid will likely need to be completed within March. I will give a more fulsome update at full council tomorrow rather than duplicate it here, but I would strongly recommend including that. There's another one that you aren't aware of yet, though will become aware of, which is the Communities and Localism white paper, which allegedly will look at the powers of towns and parishes in this particular scenario as well, and other community governance structures which may impact the council in the future. I'm told that will be released in the next month.
What's it called again? Communities and what?
Honestly, if the name stays the same, I'd be staggered. But it's communities and localism, I think is what they were saying. It's
okay.
Thank you for that.
I mean, the MPPF. Sorry, Michael. Would that bring up governance issues?
Tons of them.
Yeah.
Will they?
No.
Yeah. The local plan. My apologies, Michelle. The local plan is an absolute mass of governance issues.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other areas I thought maybe worth looking at is obviously whether, in light of the recent report into Guildford, whether we should include that, whether there's any lessons from that.
Oh, yes, right.
Of course.
My apologies, Michelle. I had actually a question for you. with the local government reorganisation that's now planned and a sort of provisional lifespan of 2 years or so for Waverley Borough Council, it's been suggested to me that we should cancel the Solace investigation into Waverley, which of course is not a mandated one. It was a request made by me to look at our own governance structures. And honestly, I wondered if the audit committee had an opinion on that, because it's something I'm weighing up at the moment as to whether we should bother with it or not. Obviously, it's time consuming for officers. It's not actually a particular cost involved, but there is a time component for particularly finance and democratic services being involved, and whether there's any value with it now. But I would be interested in your opinions.
Personally, time doesn't stand still. We don't know how long it's going to take to have a unitary authority. We've got to carry on business as usual. And imagine if something, came out later down the line. We thought we didn't bother looking at it now. It's just not acceptable. But I mean, that's just my thoughts. Anyone else? That's kind of where I am as well.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense, Paul. But I thought it had already been asked to be done and committed to. I think if not, then no, I wouldn't do it. But I think you'd have to wait until we know definitely that it's going to go ahead. We all think it. Well, in some way it's going to go ahead. The other thing is, would you change the terms of reference? Still keep it similar, but keep the terms of reference so that you've got an idea of what your procedures and things are now, so you can move them in to help you in the future merger.
Yes, Chairman. The other option is so Laura Froshaw, who's been leading the improvement plan work at Guildford. I think she may well be somebody who's actually used to do a lighter touch review of the lessons learned there and apply them here. So that's another option, rather than doing a full Solace review.
So I saw somewhere in the papers that there was an aim for it to be done by spring 2025. Is that still on track? Is it?
No, not in the current. So a few things have happened since between when we asked for it and now. So firstly, we wanted the same panel as did Guildford's to do it. One of the panel members unfortunately died in the intervening time, which wasn't ideal. And of course, then this LGR stuff has kicked off apace. So there is a point where it will be functionally pointless to do it, because we will be into shadow authority territory and creating a new legal entity, whoever's involved in that at the time. So there will be very little point in doing it. So from my point of view, exec brief will probably at some point in the next few weeks consider whether there's enough time to do a Solace report and for it to add any value. Obviously, that's going to be impacted by any announcements this week on the elections, I suspect, because that might push things out a little bit. There is also an outstanding question as to whether Surrey's issues in general are too complicated for the government to get a grip of right now. And if that is the case, we will end up being Waverley for a bit longer than we think. So there might be a reasonable evaluation. And I think we've said the point that 151 has made in terms of Laura, that might be a reasonable halfway house, but I need to have a look at what that actually means.
Okay, right.
I buy that. I think wait a few weeks.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you need full council approval to not have it? Was it a council approval?
No, it's executive decision as to whether to do it or not. That's how I'm going.
Great, thank you.
But if I could add, when we get round, I take your point about the fraud incident emerging from Guildford.
Yeah.
We can touch on that a bit later on when we look at the risk documents which are currently in place.
Yeah.
I think it's CK3 risk, RK3 or what it is. TR3.
Could I suggest that maybe we put this as the Solace review, etc., as a item to discuss at the March meeting? Because by that time, everything will have
we will know where we are.
come out of the woodwork a little bit.
Very good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. The other item I thought possibly worth looking at in terms of governance issue was the voluntary council tax payments. Your council.
And so what is being proposed by the monitoring officer is that we do a holistic review of all of the charitable trusts and other bodies that we have. So for example, we've got the UWIP bequest tomorrow night as one of the ones that we're used to doing. The management of how we deal with those ancillary bodies has not been really looked at in some time. So there is definitely a governance risk there as well. So I very much support the inclusion of that comment.
Thank you. Good evening, Councillor Reading was just entered the room.
Sorry, Andy.
Not a problem, thank you. We're just on item 6 about annual governance issues. Anything you want to see in the 24-25 annual governance statement? Is there anything you wanted to be included?
There's nothing additional for me.
So, Councillor Mullen.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Chairman. There's a couple of issues, if we're going to do it again next year, there's a couple of things. Can you just clarify what they mean and how they work? So on page 123, it's at the bottom, it says, council, 50 elected employees covering 29 wards, appoints the overview and scrutiny and other committees. Is that?
That's correct. Yeah.
I thought the leader.
No, so the council, there is a report to council with the report on the political proportionality, and that is appointed by council. The only body appointed by me is the rest of the executive.
Okay. Okay. I want to see if that was correct.
By council. Yeah.
If that was correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That was the only thing I had on there about. I think I wasn't too sure whether that was the case or not.
Okay, excellent. There's nothing else. We'll move on. Item 7, audited accounts. I believe Candice, you've got the honours of presenting.
Yeah, I'll start off and then I'll hand over to Adam. So this is our latest version of the statement of accounts. So what we're asking for in this report is a delegation for Richard alongside the chair to sign those accounts. We have got a few items remaining that we're just working through with the audit, but it's predominantly finished and it's been a very successful audit, I would say. I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to Addy and the team. Best audit team I think I've worked with actually, Addy, and they've been very good and really helpful. So it's been a really good audit for us this year. I think I'll hand over to Addy though for him to go through the draft AFR, if that's okay, Addy.
Thank you very much, Candice, and thank you for the compliments. Just to introduce myself, it's my first year taking over as the director for Grant Thornton. So at last meeting you had my colleague Matt Dean, who presented on the 22-23 accounts, and just for completion, he issued his opinion on those accounts on the 6th of December. So as Candice mentioned, in terms of this year's audit, that's gone really smoothly. And I'll also add my thanks to Candice and the rest of the finance team. So there continues to be good cooperation between both teams, and we're working very closely to wrap up the rest of the audit. So it is substantially complete, and my intention is to issue an unmodified and unqualified opinion at the conclusion of the audit. We do have a few areas to finalize, including my review of the final stages of the work. And so I'm talking largely to the second supplementary pack, and I'll refer to page references as I very briefly just take you through our findings report. So on page 4, key areas, again, happy to say that there are no material adjustments based on the work we've undertaken to date. And in terms of what we've identified to date, we identified one unadjusted error due to timing difference, and we set that out on page 30 in Appendix C. Again, I just need to obviously share that with committee, but we're happy with the finance team not adjusting for that timing difference. The two main areas in terms of work that's still outstanding is largely around the valuations of your assets. So as committee members may recall, that's it's almost like a triangular approach, because we end up raising a number of questions with the external values, and that goes back and forth in terms of the work that we do, including the sampling that cuts across not only other land and buildings, council dwellings, as well as investment properties. So that's largely complete. They've come back with queries. We've had to go back with follow-up queries, and that's what we're working through at the moment. And that will, and I anticipate that should be relatively straightforward to now finish, and I'm not anticipating that any material issues will arise from there. The other area within PPE evaluations that we're just following up with Candice and the team is in terms of assets which you did not revalue in the year. So members may recall from the last meeting that the valuation, you valued a large proportion of your portfolio in 22-23, and one of the steps that we need to undertake is just to challenge and assure ourselves that you understand the reasons why those assets have not materially changed in 23-24. So Candice just working her way through, just giving us the justification and supporting evidence behind that. The other area we said we were working on was on the pensions, and that was largely completed with one outstanding query with the auditors of Surrey County Pensions, and they actually did come back to us with that response earlier today. So we're working our way through that as we speak. And then the rest of the items we set on page 4 are just the normal closing arrangements that we work through. So that includes checking the financial statements and doing my final reviews and just ensuring that the whole report stacks up accurately. On page 5, we set out arrangements in terms of VFM, and again, I'm happy to report there are no significant value for money risk that we've identified. The report itself is on the agenda, and we'll take you through that once we've gone through the AFR and any questions committee members may have. Then very briefly through the rest of the report, pages 9 to 12 set out the significant risk that we set out in the audit plan that staff presented at the last meeting. Again, not proposing to take you through every single one of them, but happy to say that subject to what's outstanding, there are no key issues that I want to highlight to the committee's attention. Similarly, we set out the key judgments that are within your financial statements, and those are set out on page 14 to 17 of our report. Again, that's whilst there are lots of TBCs to be finished, because they're largely linked to your property valuations. That's the reason why there is the TBC there. But again, there are no issues that I need to highlight at this stage for your attention. If I briefly jump to pages 23 to 24, that sets out our independence, just to confirm to the committee that we continue to be independent and we have no issues. The only minor change to add to that is, since we presented the audit plan, we've been engaged to undertake a small piece of work on your pooling housing receipts claims. And again, just to confirm that there are no independence issues in us undertaking that piece of work. So we just highlighted that in that report. And then pages 29 sets out Appendix C that sets out all the changes to the report. So that includes both the numerical, which doesn't have any bottom line impact. And then further on, we set out all the disclosure adjustments to your draft statements based on what we've identified to date. And again, there's this standard things there, and then significant issues for me to bring to your attention there. And then finally, on page 32, we set out the fees for the audit. So again, it's the scale fee set by PSAA in response to that. The only variation to that is relating to the work we undertake on the ISA 315 in terms of the key estimates that was missed off the scale fee by PSAA, and they require us to do a fee variation for that, and we've set out what we estimated that cost will be, and at the conclusion of the audit, we'll do that fee variation to PSAA. So that would only become payable after they agree that fee variation. But at this stage, we're not proposing any other fee variation on the work. And as Candice said, the work has gone on both sides as planned, and we anticipate that we should be able to complete this work well before the backstop date of end of February. Happy to pause there and take questions from the committee on the audit findings.
Thank you very much, Addy, and thank you, Candice. When I looked at this, there's quite a lot there, so I broke it out in 3 parts, really. First is a 23-24 financial report and statement of accounts at pages 9 to 132. Secondly, there's separate papers, which Addy's just been going through, separate appendixes, which are numbered 2 to from 1 to 42. And thirdly, there's Grant Thornton's 24-25 interim report, pages 133 to 161. So if we go through each one individually and have questions and comments in respect to that. First one, as I mentioned, statement of accounts 23-24, pages 9 to 132. Are there any questions at all for Grant Thornton or Candice? I'll start off if that's okay then. We go to page 31 of the main accounts. It says the accounts are prepared as an ongoing concern on the assumption that council will continue in operational existence for the foreseeable future. Obviously, with a move to unitary councils, does that change moving forward in how you approach these accounts?
From my end, no, because regardless of the structure that eventually comes into place into plus years away, that the provision of services still applies. So practice note 10 does say that actually we can presume that going concern and the basis of preparation is still valid. So I wouldn't anticipate that there will be an issue once a reorganization is agreed and confirmed if that happens.
And do you envisage any potential accounting implications for Waverley as we move to be part of a unitary council?
There will be some consolidation of accounts, and yes, there will be some additional work there to undertake as the size of the organization yet to be determined becomes much bigger, and I suspect that there will be some amalgamation of accounts across the way. So effectively, the quantum across is still the same. You're probably just going to go down to potentially 4 organizations rather than the present, if memory serves me right, about 10 or 11 different organizations across the board.
Thank you, Eddie. Candice, I was just wondering, just following on from unitary councils, I mean, does finance team, maybe this is for Richard as well, does finance team have adequate resources not to be affected by a push towards unitary council?
Yes, Chairman, I think at this moment in time, I think we do. Having been through this twice previously, both in Dorset and Somerset, do not underestimate the task. I mean, there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done, both in terms of disaggregating the county, but then also aggregating whatever districts you can aggregate back together as well. So it is enormous. So yes, it's one to watch out for when we understand better what it is we're actually trying to deal with.
Councillor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to give some reassurance, the Surrey Leaders Group, which is the 11 district and borough leaders plus the county and its group of chief executives and 151s, have started to identify some of the core work streams and are using resources across all 11 councils and the county to start work on those core areas. Obviously, finance is one of the big ones. Just in terms of the amalgamation of accounts, the bit that, of course, is a question mark, which the government have yet to give us any information on, is the status of particularly the negative debt. I mean, there obviously is quite a lot of debt in Surrey, 5.6 billion, but not all of it is bad debt. Obviously, the Woking debt is particularly bad. We at the moment have no updates as to the status of how debt will be addressed. And that is a big concern for me, much more than currently the amalgamation process in general.
And what about the strategic mayoral authority? Would that count or that? How does that work?
That is to be determined.
That's an added complication, surely.
There are many complications there, but that's one of them, yes. Yeah, we shouldn't rush through this.
No.
Final question from me is page 39 of the sort of main sort of accountants says essentially that SEAL is recognised at the commencement date of the chargeable development. So I was just wondering, does that mean that SEAL from projects such as Dunsfold is recognised in the capital grants and applied accounts, which I think is at page 85?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
Okay. Does that affect us anyway if that doesn't, we don't get the money?
No, I mean, so that's note 33. No, I mean, we act as agent when it comes to SIL. So we're not, and if we don't collect that debt, it's not like we have to pay for it from the general fund. It sits entirely outside of our general fund. So there's no risk in terms of non-collections, etc.
Not like relying on it or anything like that.
No.
Beyond our administrative levy.
But yeah, and we do have an admin levy of 5%.
Yeah.
We always get a significant, we get more than enough in to cover our admin costs. As kind of a guarantee. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions on?
Okay, George.
You go.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Bit of a stupid question, probably, but page 82. Just curious as to why I assume it's a matter of timing, but why the salary for the joint group director for legal and democratic services was 2,750. Didn't know if it was a typo.
It's purely a timing difference, yeah. So it's just for 50% of 1 month effectively.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor
No, really, obviously it's a lot to take in. You know what I mean? And obviously, I can understand that. And there's 3 different reports in one, and and I've gone through it and tried to to work it all out and all that. But I wonder if you, Candice, could just give. I mean, it all looks great, right? All I will say is that it all looks positive, and there doesn't seem to be any big issues, government issues, and things. So for me, I'm looking at it and thinking, are there any worries and red flags? And I couldn't really find it. So if, could you reassure the committee that that what I've seen is correct?
Yeah.
That's one thing. As a layman, I can't see anything in there which is particularly worrying. But then I'm not a forensic accountant.
No, and I think the auditors are concerned about
absolutely.
We're not concerned. And I mean, in terms of the health of the organisation, I think this is a good document, but a document probably to look at in terms of our health is the Treasury annex. It's attached to our capital strategy, and that has our prudential indicators in it. And a lot of organisations' health nowadays is a lot down to their debt. Yes. So if you look at our debt and you look at our assets and you look at everything going on, I would say that Waverley's is a good and healthy organisation. And our accounts, if you know the accounts, and if you did, I don't expect you to understand them all, otherwise you can come have a job in our team. Please do. From my point of view, I think I've got no concern.
Okay, well, that's what I took from it, reading it as a lay person, but you come back in 2 years' time and say, well, why did you not spot that?
Yeah. I'll just say that in comparison with an awful lot of other district and borough councils around the country, you are in a very, very good position. So
we've got audited accounts for a start.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. That was a big hurdle, right? To get.
There are not more than probably a handful of people who've actually got all of their accounts actually done and audited and not backstopped. So and your reserves and things are in a decent place.
Okay, well done to Grant Thornton. I don't think I would question, if I have one other question, is how's Guildford's picture compared to ours, and is it comparatively healthy as similar or not? What do you say as a joint thing?
In terms of the statement of accounts, so the previous 2 sets of accounts have been backstopped, so they've not been audited at all. And this year's accounts, they will be audited. They are being audited, but again, there will be a disclaimer opinion attached to them because of obviously the fact that the previous sets of accounts have not been audited. So they're not in a as good place.
Okay.
But that's just unfortunately
Not a matter for us committee to discuss, though, is it? Really?
But I will just give some assurance on that, because although it isn't technically a matter for this committee, Guildford's accounts, it obviously is something that is of import to us as a council. Annually, we usually do some version of this, and this year's version is an informal joint meeting of both executives to go through the headlines of both statements of accounts for this year, as well as all of the collaboration implications. So we're going to do that in depth not quite as line by line as we did our own budget, but I think it's incumbent upon me and also the leader of Guildford to be aware of each other's budget positions as a function of running these two councils.
Thank you, Richard.
Any other questions on that before we move on? So second part was Grant Thornton's audit findings report 23-24, which is the second part of the paper's appendices. Any questions at all on that? Councillor Follows.
Just in terms of how we track the 11 findings that are undertaken throughout the year, obviously you'll report on them for the next one of these, but in terms of how are they managed over the course of the year and are they reported back to anybody in terms of progress?
Not particularly. So I mean, those findings, what we do with that, after we wrapped up our accounts, we have a lessons learned within the finance team. And all those items picked up by audit, we pretty much put in a list to make sure they're not picked up by audit again, because we make sure that doesn't happen again. It's not something we've ever really reported back on, because it doesn't come into play till the year after, but we could.
Well, my request on behalf of the executive to the audit committee would be that perhaps a 6-month just kind of check-in as to the progress of those actions formally at this committee would be appropriate, if you consider that.
Definitely, it's one of my questions, so thank you for that. Yeah, it's something, an update would be helpful, because obviously it's got deadlines and things like that we'd be committed to there. So,
if I may add, Chair, that's as part of our audit plan for the next year, we'll also follow up in terms of progress on those recommendations as well. So you will get an update on that from both fronts.
That's reassuring. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other questions there?
If I could just can I just check, is that what we're referring to as the recommendations 1 to 8?
Yeah, that's correct.
And Richard, if I just ask, you accept all those recommendations and are happy with?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, they are discussed with us in advance, and then we provide the management responses to them. So.
Excellent, thank you.
Ada, you obviously picked up all the bits that you're sort of waiting on, covered things like the pensions, valuations. There's one thing in there which I wasn't sure what it was, but WGA assurance statement. What's that, and what does it involve?
So that's the whole of government accounts that brings together all local authority accounts. And as you can imagine, with some of the organizations where there hasn't been an audit, in terms of auditing that whole set of accounts, which is done by a different organization, that tends to take a long time, and I think it's been qualified for record number of years simply because of the backstop. So from Waverley's point of view, you are below the threshold in terms of the work that we need to do. So all we do is complete what is referred to as an assurance statement. But under the current guidance, that's even though we've completed that, we cannot issue a closure certificate on your set of accounts until the NAO finishes the whole of government accounts audit. And given all of the backstops that we're talking about, whilst there's a set date for all audits to be completed, not all will be, because some organizations, even though it's been, they have had the time, won't have had the time to prepare their accounts. So my expectation would be that we're probably not going to get that assurance probably in this half of the year. So my expectation would be that at some point, once the NAO is satisfied with either they qualify the whole of government accounts or they come to an opinion on that, then the only action I'll need to do is, once we've issued our opinion, is simply just issue a closure certificate. So in terms of your Waverley's involvement, it's just the delayed in issuing a certificate, but it doesn't stop me from issuing the opinion on the accounts. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very clearly. Thank you very much. Any further questions on that? Councillor?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just curious as to if someone could talk me through the rationale for finding CR6 to be red, so they're failing to meet the net carbon zero by 2030. Because if you take the criteria high,
we're on to that.
Assessment.
Oh,
No,
apologies,
no,
not
that's
there.
the-
Yeah, it'll come on tax.
Part of that, okay.
So,
I will be there.
Sorry.
So if there's no further questions, move on to the third. Sorry, Councillor Murray.
Just a couple of things on there. In where it says the improvement recommendations, and because Councillor Barker Lomax is not here, and she brings this up at regular intervals, it's about benchmarking. You know, there's that kind of
Page are we
thing.
on, Councillor Murray?
Sorry?
Please, what page are you on, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a bit hard to see. It's very small. It's financial sustainability. Yeah. Yeah. She's just recommending, the report recommends a use of benchmarking to identify high cost services with action planning for alternative cost efficient service. So that's something you take into.
We've already started actually.
I've seen some of it.
We've commissioned a report, and I can share that audit, very interesting report that's benchmarked all of our services across neighbourhood authorities. Really interesting.
Well done, because I know Councillor Barker Lomax will be.
Yes, happy with that one. It's a big benchmark.
It's one of her things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. If the committee would like to see it, we can bring that here. Yeah.
And then, sorry, Chairman, the next one was also, it was the joint leadership team should receive a monthly report on financial positions instead of quarterly, which happens now. Is that now happening or is that not?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, but the management, so the CMB, the leadership team received monthly reporting and quarterly to members.
The exec are getting it quarterly for the moment, and it's coming monthly to.
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
Okay, great.
Very nicely segued into the final part, which is from page 133 onwards, which is the interim audit findings for 24-25.
So it is very confusing, Michael.
No,
Which report we're all looking at, there's so many. Exactly, Connor, you found the same thing, right?
You kickstarted it nicely. Page 137 refers to medium-term financial plan 25, 26 to 28, 29, having a funding gap of 4 million with £2 million yet to be identified. And it basically is a recommendation that we should, at page 145, maybe doing a sensitivity analysis, detailed savings plan. Is this something we're looking at?
Absolutely. I mean, and that gap was as at the time of them reviewing it. It's much better now. I think you'll see actually when the papers come up, people will be very happy with our budget gap. But we are undertaking all of those sensitivity analysis, and we'll do that over the next year. We're starting budget setting early again, so that we've got time to really look at those. But we've got a very healthy MTSP coming for you next week.
That's reassuring. Excellent. Very good. Page 139 refers to annual self-assessment, which is basically done by committee members. I think that's probably in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. I think that would be worth doing if members would agree. SIPCA have an effectiveness checklist. Maybe Kimberly, Chairman, and I can maybe liaise with you in terms of maybe getting something out to members. It's typically just a rating 1 to 3 in terms of the questions, so it should be relatively easy to do. Councillor Eden, you had a question?
No.
Councillor Fellows.
Sorry, so just to say also that the local partnerships report, if it identified one particular issue, was that we haven't gone fast or deep enough with some of the collaboration in terms of savings. So, I mean, there are areas there, and you will see the NTFP is actually very positive compared to what you might expect in local government at the moment. But there are clearly areas where we could do a bit more and a bit faster. And for me, that's particularly in functional areas, so legal, democratic, finance, HR, etc. Those areas I think are no-brainers. Some of IT is not nearly as complicated a barrier as it is sometimes described, in my opinion, as well. But that's to be discussed.
Councillor Murray.
Paul, thank you, because I read that, and what was startling out of the local partnership was how well on looking at cost saving was Winchester. You know, out of that report, I looked at it, and Winchester stands out like a massive thing, saying they cut their cost by 25% over 3 years. And you know, I'm thinking, well, you know, I don't know. You don't know why.
You don't have the context of their service provision as a comparator. I would just add to that report.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It would be quite
Yeah.
useful to say how they,
Yeah.
and also they cut
Yeah.
their staff costs down by 7.5% and stuff, because it stood out
Yeah.
like a red flag on that little box, didn't it? And I thought, wow, oh, very nice. So I looked at what Winchester's report, you know, on their thing today. It didn't really say it. It wasn't saying anything, you know, this is, you know, we've had loads of complaints or about service or anything like that. So I don't know.
I think that's the point of needing to accelerate and widen that investor save approach, so that we can start to see
look at
savings.
good practice, and it's not that far away, is it? And Wilkinson, so Winchester wasn't that different, it's
No.
more bigger, but not much bigger. I thought it was quite interesting. It stood out.
Depends where you start from, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah. You know, we don't know what the baseline was, you know what I mean? But- Exactly. But it did stand out on that report.
Councillor Davidson.
It was reassuring to hear that we're going to have a much more positive medium-term forecast. One of the things which always surprised me over the last 7 years of being a councillor is that next year's budget is fine, the year after is negative, and it gets increasingly more negative as you go into the future. From what Councillor Follows, and I think you've been alluding to, Candice, is that with the sensitivity analysis, are we looking much more positively then at not such a deep hole for the next year?
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose we are actually, so we're balanced 24-25, we legally have to be 25-26, we're balanced 26-27, we're actually looking at a small surplus. And so that's come about really with the change. We've got Richard in now, and we've looked at all of our approaches.
That's excellent to hear.
Yeah.
Because over the previous 2 years, we've landed up at the end of the year with a small surplus.
Yes, every year.
Which, you know, which makes one feel a little bit suspicious about the way the budgets are all brought together.
Yes.
Richard, yes.
Yeah, so obviously one of the things we have to do is be slightly prudent in terms of our assumptions. I mean, obviously you'd expect us to do that, and that's one of the things, one of our basic concepts. So we're always going to be err on the cautious side to a small extent, but we have relaxed that, I think, a little bit in terms of the way we've approached the budget this time round. We started much earlier. There's a huge amount of work that's been done on this year's budget to get us to this stage. The only caveat I'll say is there's also a fair funding review coming up from the government. So that's being launched, probably in the spring, I think they said.
It's been on the horizon forever though, isn't it?
Absolutely. So that could obviously change our government funding. But at this moment in time, we're basically setting a budget which will show balance for the next 2 years, which I think, again, there'll be very few councils around the country doing that.
But I think, because of the, I sense that because of the slightly more relaxed approach, the mitigation to not falling into a hole too soon is to have this monthly review of your finances. I think that is essential if you're going to take a slightly more relaxed, not loose, but relaxed approach towards your budgetary risks.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say at Waverley is your budget monitoring and the systems and processes you've got in place are really battened down. I mean, people basically cannot overspend their budget. It's not possible, so people would have to come back and flag things up as an additional pressure. So you have basically systems in place that give you a huge assurance that things are actually in the right place. So I think actually, yes, I mean, if there was an issue, we'd know about it very quickly through that monthly monitoring. But I think actually you're in a really strong, sound place, actually.
Thank you.
So,
Councillor Knight.
So do we think Councillor Merriweather will be all cheerful and happy when he presents the thing, and Peter Martin be able to say, instead of me moaning to you about being Scrooge-like and despondent about the figures, Councillor Merriweather will be able to say, it's brilliant, we've got loads of cash, we need to spend it as fast as you can. I don't know, I'm joking, but I mean, he normally comes along with it's like, oh, it's all bad, it's going to be terrible, and it's going to get worse. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm a little perplexed by this a little bit, because I mean, the answers I've had about the impact of the increase in national insurance for employers and the lowering of the national insurance thresholds was that wasn't covered by even a 3% increase in capital tax. So that implies there must be some efficiency savings
I'll cover a bit of that.
Councillor Bowles.
So firstly, Mark is always a little dour. I think we'll combat his natural liberal intent to spend money to help people. So there are some positives in the budget, as you'll see. My particular one that I'm proud of is that we've managed to not only retain the Thriving Communities budget, but increase it by 10% with this budget. So I'm really pleased to be able to do that. All the growth bids, when Candice produced a spreadsheet, which I think could be turned into a nice video game of fantasy council for people to try and figure out their own way to run a council. Instead of going through each one and seeing whether we should keep it, I zeroed out all the growth bids before a particularly lengthy exec session, and we had to argue for the re-inclusion of each line. So we got to a position where I think we're comfortable and understand every single thing that has been added back into the budget.
5.5 hours later.
5.5 hours later. It took some time, didn't it? But we did get there. I think, just talking about the national insurance increase, we believe some of it is covered. We went into the session of the executive, I think, what, £900,000 in the red.
Yeah.
Came out of it £300,000 in the black, by going through everything line by line and making sure we understood where it was coming from and how we were paying for things and going through it like that. So I think Mark will be pleased. He certainly has every right to be proud of the work of the finance team, who've worked incredibly hard to get us to that point. The exec just did the last bits. But I think we've got to a position which is rare within local government as a whole, let alone in Surrey. So
and it doesn't lean to the fact that we haven't had pressures. Absolutely, national insurance is a huge pressure,
massive one, isn't it?
and we're looking at getting a third back. Inflation is a huge pressure.
0% spending power increase.
Exactly, but what we've been looking at and working with Richard and the team is we've looked at all of our assumptions again, and we've tested those assumptions again, and we've been able to relax on some things. We've been able to increase some things like business rates where we were incredibly
incredibly
prudent. So we were probably a little bit too far. So we've been able to pull things out where they need to be, but we've still also been able to top up reserves and make sure that we've got assurances there in terms of our risk. So I mean, we've got a briefing coming up, so we'll go through it all. But I do think it's a very good budget.
Our final point was on page 148. Addy, it basically says that in our annual governance statement, we didn't state that the internal audit opinion was limited, but page 129, the annual governance statement we've got, we do actually state it was limited. So I don't know whether that was, I do recall maybe a draft didn't say limited. Maybe
Correct,
that's right.
yeah.
Are you happy we've now got it in the annual governance statement?
Yes, yeah. So at the time we wrote the report, it hadn't been updated as yet, but it has now. We're happy with the changes.
Excellent, thank you very much. And finally, just congratulations to the finance team and thank you to Grant Thornton for all your help. I mean, it's a fantastic set of results, really, and really reassuring report. So thank you for your hard work, really appreciate it. And feel free and tap if you want to go now. That's not a problem.
I'll wait for the most important bit. The committee actually approving the accounts.
Hang on, we need to discuss it.
No, so the committee was requested to approve the 23-24 auditor's statement of accounts as set out in Annex 1. 2, the letter of representation as set out in Annex 4, that's at the back of the additional papers. And 3, delegate authority to the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee and the Section 151 officer agreement of any immaterial changes required by auditor prior to sign up and authority to sign off the statement of account financial year ending 31st of March 2024. Do we all agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy about adding that. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
leave you to the rest of the meeting. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8, risk management, and Jenny, you like this?
So, good evening. Thank you for having me here with the 42 risk register. Just an update on risk management in general. At the last meeting, we had just done a survey of the executive and of this committee. so that we could produce a risk appetite, which will form part of the new risk management strategy. Following those surveys, we had a workshop with the senior leadership team to look at the risk appetite for the different categories within the risk management strategy. We have now put together a risk appetite for Waverley, which has been agreed by the executive last week. We've got a draft of the new risk management strategy and the methodology for that strategy. We've got a first draft of that, which hopefully won't require too much tweaking. That will be going to the executive in March, just before it comes to this committee at its next meeting for approval. So that's the update, and that new risk management strategy is written and will be aligned with Guildford's risk management strategy. So this Q2 strategic risk register is the risks for Q2. We held meetings with all the strategic and assistant directors to discuss the various risks. One which I'm sure will be queried and was brought up by the executive is a new risk relating to the unitary and devolution that will be included and discussed. I've already started the Q3 meetings and we have got a new risk in the Q3 risk register, which you'll see at the meeting in March.
Excellent, thank you very much, Jenny.
Could I ask a question on that, Jenny? Does that mean one of these will drop off and there'll be, will there be CR16?
We'll have a new one.
There'll be CR16, okay.
Unless for some reason during the meeting, someone says this is no longer a risk. But I don't foresee that happening.
Councillor Reading, got a question?
Yeah, so I was curious as to so CR6 failing to meet target of becoming net carbon zero by 2030. Then the commentary is quite positive around that risk. And then if you look at the indicators, high 51 to 80% chance of occurring, almost certain to happen in the next 12 months. And then the impact, critical loss, 250,000 to 500,000, sustained legal action or fine, serious injury. And I'm thinking this is 6 years out and the commentary is very positive. So what was the thinking behind that being found to be critical and hard?
Yeah.
So there's a few reasons. Firstly, the funding that we get for most of our carbon reduction projects is always in jeopardy. I mean, most of it we have to apply to outside for. And so when we get it, that's great and things can happen. When we don't, things will stall rather radically. So there's always a lot of risk in terms of how we fund these things. When we were at the point of writing this last time, there was also some doubt as to whether we'd be able to fund some of the capital requirements for some of the projects that we had out of our own budget and some of the pot that is effectively used to run that team and to bid for more money. They're very, very good at bidding for money. But at the time of this particular report, budget was far less mature through the process, and there were genuine doubts on some of the climate change budget. And of course, time marches on to a 2030 target. So every day that we move towards 2030, there's obviously less time. So there's easily scope for projects that are quite large to shift. There will indeed be an additional impact, I think, of local government reorganisation as well, because I suspect what will happen with unitarisation is that there will be a bit of an eye taken off the ball on this particular subject as assets become somebody else's assets and somebody else's action plan or lack thereof becomes whatever the policy is. So there's a lot of uncertainty with this particular policy. And bluntly, I want to keep it red because I don't think if it's anything other than red, it suitably motivates the council to achieve the relatively testing objectives that are in there and targets.
Thanks for that. So if unitarisation wasn't on the horizon, would you say that it would be more likely to be downgraded in the future because we've been more likely to meet that?
So I think that if we were remaining as Waverley Borough Council with our current funding and all of the other types of funding sources that we can bid from, I think we could stick to the plan for 2030. What I don't know at the moment is, of course, even the nature of the successor authority, or indeed if there will be one and when. I know none of these fundamental questions. I know none of the questions about Woking's debt or anybody else's debt. I don't know which assets we or the successor unitary will have. I don't know whether it's a unitary made up of 3 boroughs or 7. I don't know any of these things yet. And as a result, that is a massive uncertainty, which is why it, of course, deserves its own risk in its own right.
Thank you.
Any further questions on that?
Not on that one.
No, just on.
Looking at CR5, and in the light of the legal report which we discussed last week, you look at it and go, oh no.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'd look at it and go, oh no. I mean, looking at it in detail, there's lots of things which you've done. So a new head of procurement, you know, the contracts database, the new financial procedure rules, scheme of delegation, all these things which I know there's been a lot of executive work on and officer time and work, and they've come to council to be approved, right? I've seen them as I've seen them. So do you think we are now, or very shortly, at a stage where we can move that down to amber? I think that's the question I would ask.
I would personally say yes, probably in the next couple of quarters. I mean, at the end of the day, legal and financial tends to be a combination of people and systems. If you've got the systems right and the people right, it tends to be quite a good scenario. This particular point in time, at the time of this report, not now, the legal democratic function was somewhat under-resourced, I think it was, to put it mildly. I think we're now at the point, and Marta is of course one of our new members of staff in democratic services. I think we're now at the point that legal and democratic are fully staffed for the first time. Kim is what, 2 years, maybe more?
5 years.
5, yeah. And ultimately there's going to be a little bit of adjustment whilst new people learn our rather curious ways and culture. But other than that, the main thing it deals with is, particularly for legal, where caseload per individual was unsustainably high, and having more people in there starts to reduce that, which also reduces the risk, improves the quality of decisions, make sure that we've got capacity to check government's decisions and things like that. As Candace has mentioned several times this evening, and certainly before, our internal reporting in terms of finance is very good. As you can imagine, some of the Guildford report has, there's no other way to put it, freaked a few of us out in terms of, because you don't know what questions you haven't asked, you don't know what you don't know, so that horrible Don Rumsfeld quote again. And so what we are asking for is a slightly more stringent set of reports. Obviously, we're getting those quarterly from finance. There's the contract reports that are coming through. There is more scrutiny of each line of the budget, as you've just seen. And the other thing as well is we're quite reticent about delegation of authority to officers at the moment for obvious reasons. I mean, I don't personally have any real reason for concern, but considering the climate with Guildford, I think it's prudent for me to take a slightly more conservative attitude to that with a small C, of course.
I think I missed out on the review of the more detailed review of the risks, strategic risks. Did we have our quarterly? Is that right? Yeah, it's way fine. I'd love to be able to have a session with you, Jenny, or because I've got several questions, but it would probably bore the pants off the rest of the committee to go through all my idiotic interpretations or misinterpretations of what you're trying to assess for the risks. But one observation I do have is, and I'm sure this was probably being raised at the education on risk is that they are interrelated, as I think you're alluding to, Councillor Pollers, with the fraud, people, controls, procedures, processes. They all come together at different aspects. One thing this is just a purely personal view. Our risk is not fraud prevention, it's fraud.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether a small deletion might be applicable. But anyway, Jenny, would it be at all possible to take up some of your valuable time and just go through bits and pieces which I probably just need clarification?
That's absolutely fine.
I think one of the areas I thought might be a little bit is the major data breach is ranked very low. So very low is described as 1 to 10% change or chance of this is at the occurring. But I would have thought it's a lot higher due to risk of, typically these happen by human error. So I was just wondering why, for example, cyber attack or cyber breach is low. I would probably put it in as low, if anything.
Yeah, I will take that away to the team. I think one of the reasons that they felt it was very low is because we have, I think any officer here would tell you, we have ongoing updates. We get courses that we constantly have to do, updating on the latest scams, the latest hacks, the latest. I think the IT team feel that we really on top of keeping officers up to date, and obviously from their side, the equipment side is they on it. So they felt that the likelihood of it occurring was really low.
So I do a little bit of this in my day job, as I think some of you know, but there is obviously always a risk of insider threat, particularly bad actors within an organisation who,
for what British Museum at the weekend, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Disgruntled employee.
The main reason I would currently class it as low is actually not necessarily because of the precautions that we have per se, but it's also looking at the actual value of the data versus the difficulty of exfiltration of that data. If you look at, say, more vulnerable sectors of the public sector, and particularly the NHS is in that bracket, but there are others, there are easier targets with more vulnerable, more valuable information than a borough council. And so that's not to say that we haven't ever been targeted, and certainly, and I've looked at the data of attempted attacks, and it's slightly worrying when you look at it, the sorts of things that pop up every now and then. The area that we predominantly suffered issues from before we procured a particular cyber tool was a type of attack called dedicated denial of service, where somebody's effectively used large concentrations of bots to block various aspects of our service delivery, and often that was the planning portal and various parts of our website. And so we put in some things to deal with that. But there are softer, more valuable targets than a borough council, and not that I think we're taking a reasonable posture to this, and I think we've got reasonable controls in place. But one of the things we'll be looking at the moment is, on the flip side of this, whether our IT security posture is in fact also causing inefficiencies particularly in collaboration areas between the two councils, because our incredibly rigid IT posture between the two councils makes it nearly impossible for joint working on basic things like shared calendars. I can't, for example, see any of the calendars of the other portfolio holders at Guildford, including its leader. You can't see your opposite numbers over at Guildford without incredible effort. It's been estimated that about 30% of the PA time of a joint senior member of staff is probably in resolving basic IT issues because of the security posture. So we do need to start looking at some of this from both sides.
Does the executive look at this Paul?
Yes, we do, and I have a kind of subgroup of I mean, we had it the other day, didn't we, where we will look at it exec brief formally, but because usually risk takes up longer than an hour when we go through it line by line. I usually do it as a separate session, which is what we've done this time for Q3.
Yeah.
And as a corporate leadership board,
Yes.
do they have this as a standing item?
We do.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, supporting.
Great. Councillor Regan.
I think Councillor Murray was.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just out of interest, because I've seen this, it's off the back of your comment about disgruntled employee. I've seen this in the private sector where somebody had
Insider
access to a
threat. Insider
spreadsheet-
threat.
Inside threat.
Yeah.
Had essentially a spreadsheet with a large amount of personal data for a large number of individuals. It was able to sell that online. I mean, do we have sufficient controls in place to prevent that sort of incident?
Departmental segregation of quite a lot of this. I think for me, the question has always come up because in one side of the organisation, it's an objective to have master customer records, which, as well as being useful, is also a risk, in my opinion. But that is an area we really need to make sure when we are at that point, we've got the right controls in. I mean, the other part for the risk on reorganisation is that present Waverley does not, for example, do children's services or adult social care, an area of extreme safeguarding concern. The new unitary will. At the point you're desegregating county council services, incorporating them into new unitary services with lots of data moving around new organisations, I think there is a massive risk at the point of that process, both for Waverley and for people in Waverley. That's going to be the area we've really got to get a grip of.
Yeah, if I could, Jim, I'd just like to talk about CR11.
Yeah.
Which is, obviously it's massive, right? It's a really important element of what we do at Waverley, right? And any council and any organisation. It's all about the staff and about the team and about, how can we keep the good ones, what I mean? How can we incentivise? It's all those things which any organisation needs to be really cognizant about, especially going into any sort of unit. We've seen the issues of what's happened over the years with the collaboration and joining together with Guildford. This will only be massively exacerbated with unitaries and the worry of the staff, and I think what I hope is that this stays red because it needs to be the number one focus of any organisation mergers and unity. When we're talking about it's how we maintain the staff we have, how we keep them safe and motivated and lack of worry and all these things which we need to do, and it takes a lot of leadership. So I think this is going to be the number, to me, for this organisation is probably the number one thing. And I would hope that, and I said flippantly earlier, that the political dynamic of this organisation and other organisations, because surprisingly the Labour government want it, the Liberal Democrat Party want it, and the Conservatives want it. Jane has said she wants it. So, it's the Conservative Party's position that they want it. So hopefully this will not become a political football and a political thing. I'm really hoping it doesn't within this organisation. That all the large parties can all support it.
That's because nobody's got to the detail yet. I think I should probably just say that first up. When you get into put it this way, I can talk around the outsides of everything to do with local government reorganisation, but the moment I say, for example, articulate a particular unitary with particular boroughs in it, I will set people straight off, and that's where that will get difficult. Just on with this particular risk, I always think this should be read too, and that's not just because the numbers in terms of churn and things like that are always high, although I do take some comfort that they're high across the entire local government sector, but I also am alarmed by the fact that across the entire local government sector this is bad. I am comforted slightly by the fact that we're able to offer probably the only inflation beating pay in the entire county at present, but that is not exactly saying very much considering it's about what 0.4 above that, and of course that doesn't account for the longer standing inflation. We don't really have services, we have people that do things, and so this is always read while this is a concern. And not only is the wider narrative for local government one of constant concern for staff, but now with this additional reorganisation element on the top, I think we've obviously got to try and take staff with us on this. And a lot of people will talk rather flippantly about merging different boroughs and districts like little pieces on a map. But actually, you are talking about people and services that have to be delivered, and we have to talk about these things quite sensitively as we're doing these things. So it is a serious matter. Whoever it was that said that all of the risks are interconnected, they are, and the LGR risk will almost certainly contain a little bit of everything, frankly, on this.
Just one addition to that, I did note in the partnership report that we've got a joint assistant director of people joining in April.
Yes, not hired
correct?
yet. Have we hired? I can't remember if we've hired that one yet. No, we've got the role in the list. Yeah.
I think it said in that in the piece.
So at the moment we have HR at the sort of local level in each council, and we believe we need a strategic level for HR for that.
Right. So
it's vital for next.
That would be that person's role to look at all
that is exactly the intent.
Exactly that intention. Okay, brilliant. I mean that. Okay.
And keep in mind, I consider all things that we do in the collaboration at this point. I mean, I've been quite clear with everybody in public so far. I'm seeking as small a unitary as we can get away with in the southwest sort of corner of Surrey. I think that'd be the most representative and reasonable version of this. And our geography means that any unitary that exists will include Guildford and Waverley together. So any work that we do is surely foundational to what comes next. Okay. My apologies, Mr. Chairman, I have to disappear. Did you have any questions for me before I do?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologies for butting in a lot.
Just curious, outside of unitarisation, whether we have in place any glint surveys, pulse surveys of staff to understand their feedback, their sentiment, how they're feeling, so that we can see risks and also compare how we're doing to other organisations. I don't know if any of those exist currently.
Can I, as a member of staff, can I respond to that? Yes, we do have regular satisfaction surveys from staff that we fill in.
Interesting. Good.
We've just done a big staff survey, haven't we?
Yes.
Which we do.
I believe the results of that are coming out in a few weeks' time.
Sorry, is that a public one? Does it go to the council? Is it it's part, or does it go to an ONS committee?
We do a summary to ONS.
Yeah, I think we do. Is it ONS resources?
Yeah.
It'll certainly come out
as part of that. Okay.
Into the public domain.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
If I could add to that as well, the ONS Resources Committee has a subcommittee which looks at the issue of staff, personnel turnover and the like. And that reports at each ONS meeting for going back about 12 months.
Okay.
So it is on the radar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just to add to that, if you'd like to see further detail in the agenda that's published for that meeting, and the next one is next week, Tuesday, part of my performance report, we go down as a result of that subcommittee, we break down into a fair amount of detail, turnover of staff, sickness of staff by service area. So you can see which service areas are struggling with recruitment. We even look at time to recruit in different service areas. So I think that working group are keeping a close eye on those issues.
That would be interesting to look at. Yeah.
Who's on that group then, Jerome?
It's myself, Peter Martin, and sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
The agenda is on the Waverley website, so you can have a look at the report.
And the papers will be there shortly.
I think they are.
They were published today, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's it called?
It's ONS Resources, and if you look for the performance report,
Oh yeah, okay.
it's towards the end of the performance report, and the format is
Yeah, I'll
similar
get
to
it. I'll get it.
this.
I'm on the committee.
You
Okay.
can just-
What's the working group called?
Um,
You know, the staffs.
I can't, staff or something works.
Oh, that-
It's on so many committees.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, that is going to be vital moving forward, and especially with that, with any sort of unitary. They're all, I'm sure the staff already now, it might say, but they're already talking about it, aren't they? You know, I mean, it's already the topic of everyone's conversation. So it's topic of councillors, but it's certainly going to be topic of any officers and staff who are all going to be wondering what the impact of their futures are. So it's really, really important that the organisation gathers around them and makes sure that they are reassured. And that's going to be vital. It's going to take everybody's leadership, not just officers, but all councillors as leadership to make sure we send a positive message of whatever it is, a reassuring message. So for me, that's sort of really important, Michael. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely
I think
right.
somehow thought of.
I mean, the introduction of a unitary authority creates massive risks across the council, which will obviously feature in a risk register throughout, creating more work for you, unfortunately, Jenny. But I mean, it'd be quite good maybe to have a bit of a briefing on the structures and processes that are in place when we know a bit more information in March, possibly. A bit like
I'll do that with the March update of the strategy. So it'll be a longer item on the agenda in March. So.
Fantastic, great. Any councillor Bean?
Yeah, and we use the word reassurance. I think we ought not to hide away from the fact that this will lead to some staff not being retained. I think that's going to be a
Well, I suppose we don't know yet, do we? But
no, in reality, though, that's what's going to happen.
I'm a glass half full type person.
Optimistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the reality is that it's everything's up in the air. We have no further information. No, Richard.
Just again, talk from my past experience around this. There are things that councils can do. So there's a really good report that Grant Thornton did last year on lessons learned from previous unitary reorganisations. That's got some good stuff in it about recruitment issues. But it also, certainly from my experience, both in Dorset and in Somerset, sort of 18 months out before the new go live date, permanent recruitment was ceased, apart from in exceptional circumstances, to actually help protect those existing staff, basically, for those future roles. So you still employed people on temporary contracts or 1-year contracts or agency or whatever, but actually you did your best, basically, to make sure that people actually had a job.
And you just work through natural wastage as people leave, retire, and all that kind of stuff. And it's saying I merged 2 hotels together, and it was a similar thing to that. How we did it, you built in a cost for extra agency staffing, and it's part of the thing, and that's part of the thing. But it is really, really important about leadership and those people who want to stay, who are going to stay, that they are supported all the way through the journey, and then, like I say, you will maybe not have the problems we've had. We've learned from Guildford, but just the collaboration in that. And I think that's what people could be worried about.
Yes, I think the people most at risk are obviously the most senior officers. So that's
I can't do anything about that.
I've tried for a time twice already.
I'm sure Candice will employ you as an apprentice.
Yeah. So when Farnham Town Council becomes this big thing, we'll employ you as the.
But very good points of what change is unsettling, but I think having that reassurance will be really important. Any other comments? Jenny, thank you very much for risk register. It's very, very good. I like the presentation, and in particular the ownership as well. I think it's really important, especially sorry to bang on about the Guildford report. I think that was missing quite clearly. So it's really, really great to see. So I think it's for us as a committee, recommendations that we note the updated strategic risk register and mitigations of risk scoring. Very good about that. Right. Item 9, update on recruitment of independent members. Richard.
Yes, Chairman. So we've been digging out and using some of my contacts. Basically, I now have 5 job descriptions and person specs from other authorities around the country. So once we've got budgets out of the way, in it's time, we'll basically turn that into a proposed one for Waverley. And we'll get that out. That's we've been rather busy on closing the accounts and,
Yeah, of course, yeah,
and the
yeah.
budget. So, but yes, well, I have some very good ones here actually, which will be perfect, I think. So,
How did you find the different ones? You know, were they completely different or very similar themes?
very similar. Yeah, very similar. Because obviously, you know, the actual scope of what the committee is supposed to do is set out the regulations and sit for guidance anyway. So they are actually very similar. But I just need to find some time basically to sit down and actually put together. A work in progress.
Did we budget 5% of the allowance? Does that look broadly in line with what others are?
Some are paying them £100 per meeting. Some of them I've been giving people up to about £2,500. That was on a police one, so it's sort of slightly different. So
Yeah, I've got the money, haven't they?
That's right.
Any questions for Richard at all? Any comments on that? No. Moving on to item 10. So this is recurrent annual work programme.
Yes, thank you. So you will see in your agenda that the recurrent annual work programme is set out for you. It's purely just for you to note, for officers to advise me of any changes that are required, if something's slipping or needs to come forward quickly. I will add the items that we've discussed this evening that we want to bring up for the next meeting or future meetings. And that's really all I have to say, is that it's there for members to raise any kind of issues that they wish to bring to the meeting. It's not just a case of us officers developing the work programme. It is your committee. So if there are items that you wish to discuss, just raise them with myself or the chair, or even the vice chair as well. And we can, well, we'll let him, you know, have a bit of responsibility.
You get the massive pay
and
raise.
then we can decide, you know, when it's appropriate for that to come to the committee. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? We can
By all means.
the annual government statements.
Yes.
For which period? For this current period, to be included in the
24, 25, 26?
25, 26 it will be.
Okay, so we're
Yes.
building up the,
Yes.
so this is the
new
start of
one.
building it up.
Exactly.
Right,
yes.
okay, fine, no, just wanted to clarify that. And that's for the next two meetings that we've got. And just as a thought, on the annual information data management report,
Yes.
the information systems are there primarily, in my mind, as to support change and improvement in business performance. Is that information and data management report, are you going to include the response from who's the lady for, I forgot her name, change for business change transformation? Who's Mrs. Transformation?
I like that title.
Is that-
Laura Coppins, the information manager.
All right, and she's also responsible for transformation as well. No, she isn't. Who is the one?
It was
who's-
Yasmin Gray.
I'm sorry, I've lost my
Yeah,
organisation model.
everybody, but look, they've changed around, so I'm not sure who's on.
Well,
so they are in the process at the moment of actually getting somebody in
Yeah.
from
Okay,
MHCLG
right.
as the new director of transformation.
what if I may call an indulgence of my fellow members, Colin, if we could include the person who's responsible for business transformation as part of that session. Because in my mind, the only reason why you've got an IT system there is part of supporting the business organization
Yeah.
structures, and transformation is typically triggers IT change, and vice versa as well. Is that possible?
Absolutely, yeah.
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 So Robin is here for some of these as a placeholder. Presumably, the director will also attend or attend in his place when they're appointed.
Yeah, so I think middle of February, I believe,
Yeah.
new chaps starting on the 2 years of common for
And
release.
if I could ask that the report includes, the business transformation elements of the IT activity.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other comments?
Sorry, so just to confirm that I see on here, for the March meeting.
Yeah,
I'll be bringing the Q3 risk register and the new risk management strategy and methodology.
yes, yeah. So, sorry, that would be the. Sorry, start that again, because I.
At the March meeting,
Yeah.
I'll be bringing the new risk management strategy and the Q3 strategic risk register.
Yeah.
And then in the June-July meeting, it'll be the Q4 risk register. You do already have that there.
Yeah. That's fine.
Anything else? All happy? Right. So recommendations for audit committee is invited to note its recurrent annual work program. Very good. Thanks very much. Final item 11, exclusion of press and public. There's no items to be discussed in exempt session. So that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much all for your time. Really appreciate it.
Well done, Mike.